I'm Arthur Fletcher, 42 years old, and for the past 10 years I've held the position of Senior Project Manager at Synergy Tech, a mid-sized enterprise software company known for its complex client solutions and mission-critical systems. My specialization lies in architecting and managing software frameworks that support large-scale business operations, primarily in financial and healthcare sectors. Over the decade, I built a reputation for reliability, precision, and an almost obsessive commitment to documentation, qualities that not only earned me 3 promotions, but forged close working relationships with key clients and internal teams alike. I returned recently from a 3-month medical leave, a necessary hiatus due to a health condition I managed proactively. Throughout that period, I ensured my responsibilities were delegated properly, leaving extensive handover notes and project status reports. I also made myself available remotely for critical decision-making, which was appreciated internally, but not formally recognized. When I arrived back at the office on a Monday morning, I expected the usual routine check-ins and a gradual reintegration into ongoing projects. Instead, the first interaction that set the tone came from Gregory Marshall, my division manager. Gregory and I had worked together loosely over the years, though our professional relationship was marked by a certain distance. He was known in the company as an ambitious cost-cutter, constantly under pressure from the executive suite to reduce overhead and streamline teams for short-term financial gains. As I walked into his glass-walled office, he greeted me with a curt nod and said, "Now that you're finally back, hope you know you're easily replaceable." His tone was flat, almost dismissive, an explicit message that my decade of service hadn't accrued the loyalty or respect I had assumed. The weight of those words settled heavily in the space between us. I took a moment to compose myself, aware that any emotional response would be professionally counterproductive. Instead, I replied calmly, "Thanks for the clarity." The phrase was deliberate, neither bitter nor conciliatory, just a precise acknowledgement of the reality he presented. That afternoon, I submitted my formal resignation. I didn't make a scene or broadcast my decision. Instead, I approached it as the first step of a strategic plan that had begun forming the moment Gregory's words landed. Having documented every project milestone, client communication, and system update over the years, I knew I had leverage. More importantly, I understood that this wasn't a personal slight, but a symptom of corporate dynamics, favoring cost reduction over institutional knowledge. Walking out of the building that day, I was already considering my options, how to transform this professional betrayal into an opportunity to assert my value elsewhere, and, if necessary, to hold Synergy Tech accountable for mishandling a critical asset. My years of careful documentation and deep understanding of the enterprise systems were not just tools for project management, they were safeguards of my professional integrity. The irony was sharp. After 10 years of commitment, I was being told I was easily replaceable. But I knew that replacement wasn't a simple matter. My knowledge was embedded in proprietary software frameworks worth millions annually, and my contractual agreement included severance benefits that the company had so far overlooked. Beyond that, I had cultivated a network of industry contacts, colleagues and clients familiar with my role, who would recognize the implications of this abrupt dismissal. In that moment, I resolved to maintain a calm, methodical approach. There was no room for reckless reactions or emotional outbursts. Instead, this was a situation demanding strategic thinking, document gathering, and legal consideration. I understood that corporate politics often played out behind the scenes, but my position, as the holder of critical intellectual property and a trusted project leader, gave me tools to navigate and counteract this undervaluation. So while the words stung, I saw them as a catalyst. They clarified the company's stance and unwittingly set the terms for my next move. I had already begun mentally outlining the steps, reviewing my employment contract, cataloging communications, and preparing for a transition that would not just be a resignation, but a professional recalibration. That afternoon, after submitting my resignation, I remained professional and composed, informing HR as per protocol and ensuring a smooth initial handover. But mentally, the strategic plan had launched. Gregory might have meant to make me feel disposable, but I was preparing to demonstrate just how irreplaceable my professional expertise truly was. Over the course of 10 years at Synergy Tech, I developed and led multiple enterprise software projects that collectively generated over $2 million in annual revenue. This was not just a number on a financial report. It reflected the direct impact my work had on the company's bottom line and client satisfaction. One of my primary responsibilities involved architecting proprietary software frameworks designed specifically to handle complex workflows for our major clients in the financial and healthcare sectors. These systems demanded high reliability and scalability, and through targeted improvements, I was able to increase overall system uptime by approximately 35% compared to the metrics recorded before my tenure. My approach was methodical. Every line of code, system integration, and user interface change was meticulously documented. This level of detail ensured that any modifications could be reliably traced and audited, which was critical in environments subject to regulatory compliance. Beyond the technical aspects, I also took pride in mentoring a team of 12 professionals, software developers, QA engineers, and business analysts, guiding them not only in technical execution, but also in understanding the strategic importance of our projects. This leadership role extended to negotiating client contracts, where I collaborated with legal and sales teams to align deliverables with contractual obligations, further solidifying the company's credibility and trustworthiness. My performance consistently exceeded expectations, earning me 3 promotions over the years, from project lead to senior project manager. Each step up the ladder came with increased responsibility and deeper involvement in strategic planning. One key facet of my employment contract was the severance package tied to a 12-month vesting schedule, designed to protect employees in the event of involuntary termination. I had always viewed this clause as a necessary safeguard, not anticipating it would become a critical leverage point. Within the company, my reputation was that of a reliable and indispensable asset. I maintained comprehensive repositories containing system architecture diagrams, version-controlled source code, and detailed email correspondence with clients and stakeholders. While these documentation practices were time-consuming, they were invaluable for continuity and risk mitigation. However, this very thoroughness, coupled with the high salary I commanded, made me a target when the company's leadership, facing budget pressures, sought to reduce costs by trimming senior staff. Despite my tenure and contributions, the subtle office politics and shifting priorities around cost-cutting meant my value was being reassessed purely through a financial lens. The institutional knowledge I had accumulated over a decade was embedded deeply in core systems that only I fully understood. This created a paradox. While I was deemed easily replaceable verbally, the reality was that replacing me without causing disruption or risking proprietary information leakage would be complex and costly. My contractual severance benefits were particularly significant in this context. According to the detailed terms, abrupt termination without cause would trigger substantial financial obligations for Synergy Tech. These clauses included not only monetary compensation, but also protections against premature competitive employment through non-compete agreements. I had maintained a clean performance record, so any move to terminate required procedural compliance that, as it turned out, the management chose to overlook. In summary, my professional background at Synergy Tech was built on a foundation of technical mastery, leadership, and thorough documentation practices that ensured both project success and risk management. The revenue generated, system improvements realized, and team development accomplishments all underscored my deep integration within the company's operational framework. This level of involvement made the dismissive message from Gregory Marshall not only professionally disrespectful, but also strategically misguided from a corporate governance perspective. I had always considered my role as a guardian of the company's critical intellectual property and client relationships. This perspective shaped my reaction and subsequent strategic planning when faced with the abrupt devaluation of my worth. I knew that the very elements that made me a target, my salary, seniority, and deep knowledge, could also become cornerstones of a calculated professional response. This was not about retaliation. It was about holding the company accountable for disregarding the complex realities tied to my position and contractual rights. The next steps involved systematically reviewing the precise scope of my contributions and contractual protections, which would form the backbone of the leverage I intended to wield. Every project milestone, every client communication, every piece of code under my stewardship was a data point in building a comprehensive case. The groundwork for turning corporate betrayal into professional validation was well underway. Gregory Marshall's strategy became clear very quickly once I started piecing together the corporate moves behind the scenes. Under tremendous pressure from the C-suite to slash operational expenses, he had zeroed in on veteran employees with the highest salaries, myself included, as prime targets for cost-cutting. His plan was straightforward: replace me with a junior manager who commanded roughly 40% less in annual salary, aiming to save the company approximately $118,000 each year. This figure wasn't arbitrary. It was carefully calculated based on my compensation package and the projected cost of onboarding and training a less experienced replacement. From a purely financial standpoint, the logic seemed tidy. Reduce fixed personnel costs, introduce fresh, cheaper talent, and demonstrate fiscal responsibility to upper management. However, Gregory completely underestimated the complexity woven into my role. The institutional knowledge I held wasn't just about managing projects. It was embedded in proprietary software systems, intricate client contracts, and ongoing operational workflows that only I fully understood. His focus on immediate savings blinded him to the substantial risks associated with such a swap. Critically, Gregory overlooked the legal and contractual frameworks protecting my position. My employment contract included a severance clause guaranteeing compensation, amounting to 12 months' salary, should I be terminated without cause. This wasn't a mere formality. It was a binding agreement that ensured financial protection for employees in exactly the kind of scenario Gregory was engineering. Ignoring this clause meant exposing Synergy Tech to legal challenges and potential regulatory scrutiny. Moreover, the contract contained a non-compete clause designed to prevent immediate transition to direct competitors, but with conditions that Gregory had not factored into his plans. This clause, rather than being a shield for Synergy Tech, ironically gave me leverage to negotiate terms favorable to my next career move. If the company failed to honor severance obligations or improperly terminated my employment, the enforceability of the non-compete would weaken, opening the door for me to join a rival without legal entanglements. On the operational side, the proprietary software frameworks I managed were tightly controlled and uniquely configured. System dependencies and code repositories were centralized under my administration. Gregory's plan did not include comprehensive transition protocols or knowledge transfer schedules, details that were critical for maintaining uninterrupted client service. Without these, the risk of system failures or security lapses was significant, jeopardizing client contracts worth $3.2 million annually. Adding to this was the involvement of David Langston, the HR director, who, while procedurally compliant, failed to question the legality and practicality of the dismissal strategy. David's role was to ensure that terminations adhered to company policies and labor regulations. However, he appeared to rubber-stamp the decision based on cost directives from Gregory, without a thorough legal review or consideration of intellectual property protections. His procedural approval inadvertently exposed the company to vulnerabilities that I could exploit. Gregory's oversight extended to ignoring documented internal policies regarding employee transitions. The company's standard operating procedures required detailed transition plans for any critical role, complete with client communication strategies and system handover documentation. None of these protocols were activated or even discussed in my case. This omission not only increased operational risk, but also created a clear paper trail demonstrating management's willful neglect. Throughout this period, my extensive documentation, including email threads, meeting minutes, and project logs, painted a stark picture of deliberate managerial intent to sideline me without proper cause or process. The written record showed Gregory's direct involvement in orchestrating the replacement, while sidelining my role's inherent complexities and contractual safeguards. This documentation would soon form the backbone of any legal or regulatory challenge. The irony was palpable. Gregory believed that simply swapping a senior expert for a junior, cheaper manager would be a clean, cost-effective move. In reality, this unilateral decision ignored the realities of intellectual property stewardship, client relationship management, and contractual obligations. It was a classic example of short-term financial expediency clashing with long-term operational integrity. Recognizing these critical oversights, I understood that the company's cost-cutting gambit was vulnerable on multiple fronts: contractual non-compliance, intellectual property risks, regulatory exposure, and reputational damage. This multidimensional vulnerability created a strategic opportunity for me to assert leverage, not through confrontation, but through methodical, evidence-based professional action. From my vantage point, the unfolding situation was less about personal affront and more about corporate governance failures. Gregory's narrow focus on salary reduction ignored the broader fiduciary duties involved in managing a key division responsible for high-value client services. The absence of transition protocols and disregard for severance terms were not just procedural lapses, but potential breaches of duty that could be addressed through the appropriate legal and regulatory channels. In the days following, I began consolidating all related documentation, contracts, emails, system access logs, and HR communications to build a comprehensive case. I also discreetly reached out to trusted colleagues who could attest to the unauthorized onboarding of my replacement and the lack of formal knowledge transfer. Each piece of evidence underscored that Gregory's cost-cutting strategy was not only flawed, but also legally and operationally unsound. Meanwhile, Gregory and David operated under the assumption that the combination of hierarchy and financial pressure would shield them from accountability. Their failure to anticipate the contractual and system-wide ramifications was a critical miscalculation. It became evident that if I proceeded strategically, I could leverage these oversights to challenge the dismissal and position myself advantageously in the industry. In summary, Gregory's motivation was driven by immediate cost savings and executive pressure, but his execution revealed significant blind spots. By ignoring severance clauses, non-compete conditions, and proprietary system dependencies, he exposed Synergy Tech to legal risks and operational jeopardy. This confluence of financial ambition and managerial oversight set the stage for a methodical professional response, one grounded in leveraging documented evidence and contractual rights to ensure not only personal restitution, but also corporate accountability. After submitting my resignation, the next critical step was to methodically review and analyze every piece of documentation related to my termination and the company's replacement plans. I approached this task with the same precision and strategic mindset that defined my professional work. My objective was to identify concrete leverage points, specifically contractual breaches, operational risks, and regulatory non-compliance that would form the foundation of any legal or professional challenge. I began by thoroughly examining the formal termination notice I received from HR. The letter was terse, citing vague organizational restructuring as the reason for ending my employment. It failed to reference the severance package outlined explicitly in my contract, which guaranteed compensation equivalent to 12 months' salary if terminated without cause. This omission was a glaring oversight and a clear breach of contractual obligation. I documented this discrepancy carefully, copying the relevant severance clause from my employment agreement and highlighting its absence in the termination paperwork. Next, I analyzed internal communications that had circulated in the days leading up to and following my departure. Among these were official announcements from Gregory's office regarding the onboarding of my replacement. The emails confirmed that a junior manager had been hired at approximately 40% less annual salary, aligning with the cost reduction goals I had anticipated. However, what caught my attention were the communications' timing and content. The replacement onboarding commenced prior to my formal departure, effectively sidelining me prematurely. I cross-referenced these emails with budget spreadsheets provided by the finance department, which had been circulated as part of Gregory's quarterly cost-cutting initiative. These documents explicitly detailed projected savings of about $118,000 annually from salary reductions tied to staff changes, including my position. The spreadsheets also showed that no funds had been allocated for severance payouts or transition-related expenses, further substantiating the company's disregard for contractual and procedural obligations. Moreover, I scrutinized system logs and access records from IT and project management platforms. These logs revealed that critical transition protocols, which I had previously implemented for all key projects, had been conspicuously absent in this case. There were no scheduled knowledge transfer sessions, no handover documentation shared with the replacement or other team members, and no formal client communications outlining continuity plans. This lack of protocol violated internal policies and posed significant risks to client service continuity, risks that I had a duty to highlight. To understand the broader regulatory environment, I reviewed applicable labor laws and company policies governing termination and employee treatment. The state's labor code mandates timely severance payments and prohibits dismissals that circumvent contractual protections. It also enforces stringent requirements for protecting intellectual property created by employees, particularly in technology sectors like ours. By juxtaposing these regulations with Synergy Tech's actions, I identified multiple points where the company's conduct potentially violated legal standards. The email correspondence was particularly revealing. Several internal messages captured Gregory's explicit intentions to expedite my replacement and minimize costs, even at the expense of following due process. One email from Gregory to HR stated, "Let's prioritize cost savings over extended transition. No need to drag this out." This admission was critical because it demonstrated willful neglect of fiduciary duties and set the stage for claims of bad faith termination. Additionally, I collected statements from teammates who had observed the abrupt sidelining and unauthorized onboarding of the replacement manager. Their accounts confirmed the absence of formal transition measures and corroborated the timeline indicated by the documents. These statements would prove invaluable as witness testimony should legal proceedings arise. I organized all evidence into a structured inventory: formal notices, budget documents, email threads, system access logs, policy references, and witness statements. This evidence index allowed me to connect dots systematically and assess the full scope of Synergy Tech's procedural failures and contractual breaches. Throughout this review, I maintained a clinical mindset, focusing solely on facts and leverage rather than personal grievance. This analytical approach ensured my strategy remained grounded in verifiable evidence and legal principles rather than emotional reaction. I recognized that the company's tactical oversight, ignoring severance obligations, bypassing transition protocols, and exposing critical systems without safeguards, was a vulnerability I could exploit professionally. Importantly, I noted the direct financial implication. $118,000 in unpaid severance constituted a substantial monetary claim. Combined with the operational risks and regulatory violations, this figure represented both a tangible loss and a powerful bargaining chip. This comprehensive assessment confirmed my initial intuition that Synergy Tech's actions were not only dismissive, but legally precarious. They had underestimated the operational complexity and contractual protections tied to my role. More than that, they had created a scenario ripe for systematic consequences, which I was now fully prepared to pursue. With these findings in hand, I was ready to advance to the next phase, assembling a formal legal and professional response that would hold Synergy Tech accountable while positioning myself advantageously within the industry. My documentation, combined with expert counsel, would soon transform this breach of trust into an opportunity for structured, evidence-based justice. After completing my thorough internal review of all documents and communications related to my termination, I knew the next step was to engage legal expertise to evaluate my position and develop a formal response strategy. I scheduled an initial consultation with employment attorney Lisa Carmichael, a specialist known for her proficiency in wrongful termination and intellectual property cases within the tech sector. Lisa's reputation for meticulousness and strategic litigation aligned well with my own methodical approach. Before our meeting, I meticulously organized every piece of evidence: emails, contracts, system architecture documentation, budget analyses, internal memos, and witness statements into a comprehensive chronological archive. This archive was not just a simple folder, but a detailed indexed digital repository with cross-referenced metadata tags to quickly retrieve relevant documents. Each item was annotated with context and potential implications, which would facilitate Lisa's assessment and ensure no detail was overlooked. The chronological arrangement was critical. It allowed us to visualize the sequence of events precisely, particularly the timeline of my sidelining, the premature onboarding of my replacement, and the internal budget allocations that excluded severance considerations. This timeline underscored the deliberate nature of management's strategy and provided a solid foundation for claims of bad faith and contractual breach. In addition to documentation, I secured encrypted backups of all proprietary code repositories and system administration credentials that I controlled. These backups were stored securely offline, ensuring that I retained access to critical intellectual property elements that Synergy Tech risked losing or mishandling during the abrupt transition. Preserving these assets was a precaution against unauthorized use or tampering, and it also strengthened my position by demonstrating my control over essential system components. I also reached out discreetly to several trusted teammates, senior developers and project leads who had first-hand knowledge of my role in the transition process. With their consent, I collected signed witness statements confirming that no formal knowledge transfer or transition protocols had been followed during the onboarding of my replacement. These statements documented the timeline and procedural omissions, providing corroborating evidence beyond the emails and logs. Lisa and I discussed the non-compete clause embedded in my contract in detail. Its conditions were restrictive under normal circumstances, but given the company's failure to honor severance obligations and the improper handling of my termination, we identified a potential weakening of its enforceability. I realized this clause, instead of limiting my options, could be leveraged to negotiate favorable terms with a rival firm without the typical legal entanglements. This was a critical insight, as it opened the door to simultaneously pursuing legal remedies while advancing my professional opportunities. Throughout this phase, I maintained an internal dialogue focused on strategic patience. They have underestimated the complexity of the systems and the strength of documented contractual terms. Their disregard for transition policy and severance obligations is their weakness. If I remain methodical, the evidence will speak louder than any emotional response. To prepare for potential legal action, I indexed all evidence into categories aligned with possible claims: wrongful termination, breach of contract, unpaid severance, intellectual property protection, and regulatory non-compliance. This structured approach enabled Lisa and me to tailor complaint drafts for the Department of Labor and the State Regulatory Board, ensuring comprehensive coverage of all legal angles. I also drafted a timeline for communications, ensuring that all correspondence with Synergy Tech's management, HR, and legal departments would be professional, fact-based, and documented. Maintaining professionalism in tone and content was imperative, as any misstep could be used against me. It was a delicate balance: assertiveness without hostility, clarity without confrontation. Internally, I formulated a contingency plan for transitioning to a rival firm, contingent on the legal strategy's progress and the non-compete clause's enforceability. The plan included notifying key clients at Innovatech, already identified as a potential new employer, about the risks Synergy Tech's mismanagement posed, without breaching confidentiality or contractual obligations. This proactive client communication was designed to position me as a reliable resource amid uncertainty, indirectly pressuring Synergy Tech further. By the end of this strategic planning phase, I had transformed what initially felt like professional betrayal into a well-documented, legally sound position of leverage. Every document, witness statement, and backup was a piece of the puzzle that, when assembled, revealed a pattern of managerial negligence and contractual violations. This foundation was crucial, not only for pursuing accountability, but also for securing my future career moves on firm, professional ground. In summary, this phase was defined by rigorous organization, expert legal consultation, and strategic foresight. My calm, systematic collection and preparation of evidence set the stage for the next moves, formal legal action, and a new professional chapter, without compromising my integrity or professional reputation. The groundwork was laid, the evidence compiled, and the plan set in motion. After compiling an exhaustive archive of all pertinent documents, I arranged a consultation with Lisa Carmichael, a seasoned employment attorney whose expertise in wrongful termination and intellectual property disputes within the tech sector was well recognized. Prior to our meeting, I ensured that every piece of evidence was meticulously organized: employment contracts, termination notices, internal emails, proprietary system diagrams, budget analyses, witness statements, and IT access logs were catalogued chronologically and cross-referenced. Each file was annotated to highlight contractual provisions, timelines, and potential violations, facilitating Lisa's comprehensive review. Once we convened, Lisa's assessment was definitive. She identified multiple violations that Synergy Tech had committed, starting with the improper termination. The formal notice cited organizational restructuring, but failed to mention or provide the severance package explicitly guaranteed in my employment contract. This package, tied to a 12-month vesting schedule, was designed to protect employees from abrupt termination without cause. The absence of any severance payment or settlement offer constituted a clear breach of contract. Lisa also scrutinized the non-compete clause embedded in my agreement. Normally, this clause would restrict my ability to engage immediately with competitors. However, she noted that the company's failure to honor severance terms and the improper dismissal weakens the enforceability of this clause, creating a legal window for negotiation with rival firms. This insight was crucial, as it provided a pathway to transition my career without the threat of protracted legal battles over non-compete restrictions. Most critically, we examined the breach of intellectual property protocols. The proprietary software frameworks I had architected were central to Synergy Tech's revenue streams, contributing over $3.2 million annually. The technical diagrams I provided detailed my exclusive control over key modules and code repositories, underscoring that no proper knowledge transfer or system handover had occurred. This lack of transition violated internal policies and exposed the company to operational risks, as well as potential intellectual property misappropriation if unauthorized personnel accessed these systems. Emails between Gregory Marshall and HR revealed deliberate circumvention of transition protocols. One internal message explicitly instructed prioritizing cost savings over proper handover procedures, underscoring bad faith on management's part. Lisa emphasized that this deliberate neglect could form the basis for regulatory complaints, citing breach of fiduciary duty and willful disregard for employee rights. In preparation for formal action, we drafted complaints to submit to the Department of Labor and the state's regulatory board. These documents incorporated all evidence: contract excerpts, termination notices, internal communications, technical diagrams, and witness statements from colleagues who attested to the absence of authorized transition measures. Each claim was articulated with precise references to legal statutes governing wrongful termination, severance obligations, and intellectual property protections in the technology sector. Lisa also advised on maintaining meticulous professionalism in all further communications with Synergy Tech. Any correspondence needed to be factual, unemotional, and documented to avoid weakening the legal position. We prepared templates for responses, requests for information, and notifications to the company's HR and legal departments about the pending complaints. Concurrently, we considered strategic leverage points, such as the company's operational exposure due to system transition failures and potential contractual breaches with clients stemming from inadequate handover. These vulnerabilities, combined with the legal violations, positioned me to negotiate from a place of strength. Overall, this phase crystallized the legal foundation of my response. The evidence was incontrovertible, the contractual breaches clear, and the regulatory path defined. The professional and legal framework we established would enable a methodical pursuit of accountability while opening doors for my next career steps free from undue constraints. This systematic approach transformed the initial professional betrayal into a calculated and enforceable claim rooted in facts, contracts, and regulatory statutes. After finalizing the comprehensive legal strategy with Lisa Carmichael, I initiated the next critical phase: formally notifying Synergy Tech's human resources and legal departments of the impending complaints. I drafted a clear, professionally worded letter outlining the basis of my concerns, specifically citing the breach of contract related to unpaid severance, improper termination procedures, and lapses in intellectual property protection due to the lack of proper system transition protocols. This letter referenced key documents, including my employment agreement, termination notice, and internal emails that exhibited management's deliberate bypassing of established policies. My aim was not confrontation, but to establish a documented record that the company had been duly informed and given an opportunity to address these violations before regulatory escalation. I sent this notification via tracked email and certified mail to ensure receipt acknowledgement, copying the heads of HR and legal, as well as Gregory Marshall for transparency. All correspondence was archived meticulously within my evidence repository, maintaining a timeline of communication that would be essential for any future proceedings or negotiations. The tone was factual and dispassionate, reinforcing my commitment to professionalism and rule-based resolution. Simultaneously, I secured and accepted a senior project manager position at Innovatech, a direct competitor, with terms considerably more favorable than my previous role. The offer included a 25% salary increase and equity participation, reflections of my value in the market and recognition of my expertise. Prior to accepting, I had thorough discussions with Innovatech's Director of Operations, Elliot Barnes, presenting summarized documentation of Synergytech's mishandling without breaching confidentiality agreements. Elliot acknowledged the operational risk Synergytech faced and saw immediate strategic advantage in onboarding me. Together, we devised a transition plan that would preserve client relationships and minimize service disruption during the move. Throughout this period, I maintained strict professionalism in all communications with Synergytech. Despite the adversarial undercurrent, I ensured that all transition documents I submitted were detailed, accurate, and submitted within agreed timelines. This included updated project status reports, system configuration notes, and security access change requests, demonstrating my commitment to a seamless handover, even as Synergytech continued onboarding my replacement without formal knowledge transfer protocols. Importantly, Gregory remained unaware of the full extent of my preparations. I refrained from any overt disclosures or confrontations, allowing him to operate under the assumption that my departure was routine. This tactical silence preserved leverage. Any premature awareness on his part could have led to obstructive countermeasures. Internally, I monitored Synergytech's responses closely, ensuring that all my actions were compliant with contractual obligations and legal advice. With Innovatech, I took proactive steps to alert key clients, those whose contracts and service delivery were most at risk due to Synergytech's deficient transition, to potential continuity issues. These communications were carefully crafted to provide reassurance of my availability and commitment, subtly underscoring the operational risks inherent in Synergytech's mismanagement without directly disparaging my former employer. This positioning served dual purposes, protecting client interests and amplifying pressure on Synergytech by highlighting external awareness of their vulnerabilities. By methodically executing this phase, I balanced assertive protection of my professional interests with a measured, evidence-based approach that upheld my reputation. The simultaneous notification of complaints and acceptance of a competitive role created a dynamic where Synergytech faced mounting legal and operational challenges, while I advanced my career under favorable terms. This period marked a strategic pivot, from internal documentation and legal preparation to public professional repositioning, with every step designed to maximize leverage and minimize risk. At this juncture, the situation remained volatile. Synergytech had yet to respond substantively to the formal notices, and Gregory continued to manage the onboarding of my replacement, unaware of the impending regulatory scrutiny. I remained vigilant, preparing for the next phase where the consequences of this calculated strategy would begin to manifest more tangibly, setting the stage for systematic professional accountability. Within days of my formal notification and the initiation of complaints, Synergytech's operational vulnerabilities began to surface, and the system failures I had long anticipated started to materialize. The proprietary software frameworks I had architected and maintained functioned as the backbone for several critical client workflows. Without the detailed transition protocols, handover documentation, or knowledge transfer sessions I had insisted on over the years, the incoming team struggled to maintain system stability and address support tickets effectively. The first warning signs emerged as a series of escalating incident reports logged by support staff, all linked to gaps in system maintenance procedures and undocumented dependencies. These incidents weren't random glitches. They were symptomatic of the absence of a comprehensive transition plan, something that I had explicitly documented and mandated in previous project cycles. The system modules under my exclusive control started exhibiting irregular behavior, and crucial automated processes failed to execute on schedule, causing client-facing delays. By the third day, client complaints began filtering in, primarily from long-term partners dependent on the uptime and responsiveness guaranteed in their service-level agreements. I kept a close eye on these developments, not out of spite, but because the consequences confirmed the operational risks I had identified and documented. The support delays and system inconsistencies were precisely the type of service disruptions that could jeopardize multi-million-dollar contracts and erode client trust, which in turn would impact Synergy Tech's revenue streams and reputation. Meanwhile, Gregory Marshall's office started experiencing a noticeable increase in regulatory inquiries. The Department of Labor and Industry Compliance Boards had begun reviewing my formal complaints, and the initial probes were evidently prompting HR and legal teams to scramble for damage control. Confidential sources within the company leaked that Gregory was increasingly pressured to respond, though his focus remained primarily on controlling costs rather than rectifying the operational failures. One particularly telling moment occurred when Gregory reached out to me indirectly through legal channels. He proposed a consulting arrangement, ostensibly to assist with the system transition and mitigate service impacts. The offer came with terms that implied urgency, but lacked any acknowledgement of the contractual breaches or the professional standards I had consistently upheld. My legal counsel promptly advised a firm yet professional refusal, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a clear boundary and preserving all correspondence as evidence. I instructed my attorney to respond accordingly, declining the consulting offer while requesting formal acknowledgement of the outstanding severance obligations and transition failures. Within the company, internal audits were triggered by the mounting operational issues and regulatory notices. These audits, though conducted discreetly, began uncovering significant gaps in adherence to established policies, particularly the failure to execute transition protocols that I had codified and routinely enforced. The audit findings detailed the absence of knowledge transfer sessions, the lack of updated system documentation available to the replacement team, and lapses in access control for sensitive code repositories. Gregory's panic became more evident as his cost-cutting strategy unraveled. His initial assumptions that replacing me with a junior manager at lower cost would be straightforward collided with the complex reality of system stewardship and contractual obligations. The operational failures, combined with regulatory scrutiny and internal investigations, amplified the consequences beyond mere financial miscalculations. His leadership credibility within Synergy Tech was visibly eroding. Throughout this period, I maintained a strictly professional posture. I avoided direct confrontations and refrained from public commentary, understanding that my strength lay in documented evidence and procedural rigor, not in reactionary disputes. I continued to communicate through legal counsel, ensuring that all exchanges were recorded and that professional decorum was preserved. This approach not only protected my legal position, but also projected an image of controlled competence to colleagues, clients, and industry observers. Simultaneously, I kept Innovatech informed of the unfolding situation, highlighting how Synergy Tech's mismanagement was creating tangible risks to client service continuity. This proactive communication served two purposes. It reassured key clients of Innovatech's stability and expertise under my leadership, and subtly underscored the operational consequences of Synergy Tech's neglect. This positioning bolstered my professional reputation and augmented pressure on my former employer, without resorting to disparagement. Importantly, the system failures and client complaints were consistent with the very vulnerabilities I had anticipated and documented during my strategic reviews. The absence of formal transition protocols was not a minor oversight, but a critical governance failure that exposed Synergy Tech to financial, legal, and reputational damage. The unfolding scenario validated the evidence I had compiled and strengthened the foundation for regulatory and legal actions already underway. As these events transpired, I remained vigilant, monitoring Synergy Tech's responses and adjusting my strategy accordingly. The operational disruptions were the tangible manifestations of the corporate mismanagement I was challenging, evidence that would support claims of breach of fiduciary duty, negligence in intellectual property stewardship, and violation of contractual terms. In summary, the days following my resignation and formal complaint submissions marked the beginning of cascading professional consequences for Synergy Tech. The system failures, client dissatisfaction, regulatory inquiries, and internal audits collectively signaled that the company's attempt to sideline me without proper transition safeguards was unraveling. Gregory's panic and overtures for consulting underscored his recognition of the mounting crisis, yet his approach remained reactive and insufficient. This phase of the unfolding professional drama firmly established the operational and regulatory vulnerabilities that my strategic documentation had anticipated. It set the stage for the next phase, escalating legal actions and intensified pressure on Synergy Tech to address the breaches and obligations it had neglected. The professional reckoning was underway, and the evidence I had meticulously gathered was proving its critical value. Simultaneously, I initiated formal legal action against Synergy Tech, filing a lawsuit that articulated clear claims: $118,000 in unpaid severance, breach of contract, and intellectual property misappropriation. This was not an impulsive reaction, but a calculated escalation based on months of comprehensive documentation and legal counsel. The complaint detailed how the company had failed to meet its contractual obligations by terminating my employment without cause, neglecting severance payments explicitly guaranteed by my contract's 12-month vesting clause. Furthermore, the suit asserted that Synergy Tech had compromised proprietary intellectual property protections by allowing unauthorized access to and mismanagement of critical software frameworks under my control, frameworks central to client contracts generating over $2 million annually. The preparation of the lawsuit was methodical. My attorney, Lisa Carmichael, and I meticulously cross-referenced employment agreements, termination notices, internal emails, and system access logs, creating a narrative that demonstrated not only procedural violations, but also deliberate managerial intent. One particularly damning piece of evidence was an email exchange between Gregory Marshall and the HR director, David Langston, explicitly prioritizing cost savings over mandated transition protocols. This email was pivotal as it evidenced bad faith actions and willful disregard for fiduciary duties, strengthening claims against both individuals and the corporate entity. Concurrently, we submitted formal complaints to the Department of Labor and the state's regulatory board overseeing employment practices and technology sector compliance. These complaints outlined violations of labor laws related to wrongful termination and failure to uphold severance agreements, as well as breaches of intellectual property stewardship regulations. The regulatory filings incorporated detailed exhibits, system architecture diagrams I had developed, project revenue reports, and witness statements from colleagues who confirmed the unauthorized onboarding of my replacement and absence of transition oversight. This multi-pronged legal approach aimed to exert pressure on Synergy Tech from several angles, increasing the likelihood of a negotiated settlement or regulatory sanctions. The lawsuit and regulatory complaints triggered immediate internal repercussions at Synergy Tech. Within days, the company's HR and legal departments were inundated with inquiries and requests for documentation from regulatory investigators. Confidential sources informed me that audits had been launched focusing on Synergy Tech's compliance with labor laws and intellectual property protection policies. This scrutiny exposed significant operational gaps, particularly the failure to execute formal knowledge transfer processes that I had long championed. These lapses not only endangered client service continuity, but also exposed the company to potential claims of intellectual property theft or unauthorized use. Simultaneously, client-facing disruptions began to surface, further compounding Synergy Tech's challenges. The proprietary software systems I had architected and managed started exhibiting instabilities linked directly to insufficient transition protocols. Support tickets increased in volume and severity, with some clients formally lodging complaints about delayed responses and inconsistent service quality. These operational failures were reflected in internal reports I obtained through industry contacts, confirming that Synergy Tech's revenue streams and contract compliance were at tangible risk. The convergence of legal pressure and operational disruption created a feedback loop that heightened the company's vulnerability. Throughout this period, Gregory Marshall's professional standing suffered markedly. His initial confidence in executing cost-cutting measures eroded as regulatory investigations intensified and client dissatisfaction mounted. Internal communications leaked, indicating his growing desperation, culminating in a tentative offer to retain my consulting services to mitigate transition risks. I, through legal counsel, declined this offer, emphasizing the unresolved contractual breaches and the inappropriate timing of such a proposal. Maintaining this strict boundary preserved the integrity of my legal position and prevented any undermining of the case. Settlement discussions eventually emerged from Synergy Tech's legal team, proposing financial compensation and potential reinstatement. However, I remained firmly committed to a principled approach, supported by my counsel's advice, stating simply, "My lawyers will be in touch." This response signaled that any resolution would be contingent on full acknowledgement of breaches and adequate restitution, not expedient appeasement. The unfolding legal and operational landscape underscored a systematic professional trap that the company had inadvertently constructed through neglect and hubris. My comprehensive documentation and strategic patience transformed what began as a dismissive managerial comment into a robust, enforceable claim. Regulatory bodies expanded their investigations, setting the stage for cascading consequences that would affect Synergy Tech's leadership, reputation, and financial stability in the ensuing months. At this juncture, the situation remained dynamic and unresolved, with both sides maneuvering within legal and professional frameworks. Synergy Tech confronted mounting evidence and external pressures, while I continued to safeguard my professional integrity and advance my career prospect. The foundation was laid for further developments, legal, operational, and reputational, that would unfold progressively, validating the strategic approach I had meticulously constructed. The fallout from the mounting scandal was swift and severe. Within weeks, Synergy Tech's board of directors took decisive action, terminating Gregory Marshall's employment amidst the growing controversy. His dismissal was framed as a necessary step to restore confidence in the company's leadership and operational integrity. Internally, emails and meeting minutes referenced a comprehensive review of management failures, highlighting Gregory's role in the ill-conceived cost-cutting measures and the negligent handling of critical transition responsibilities. The board's decision reflected not only the financial consequences, but also the reputational damage that had begun to erode stakeholder trust. Simultaneously, Synergy Tech faced significant financial penalties. Regulatory agencies imposed fines exceeding $500,000, citing violations of labor laws and deficiencies in safeguarding intellectual property, issues directly tied to the mishandling of my termination and the subsequent operational lapses. The Department of Labor's formal findings emphasized the company's failure to honor severance contracts and implement required transition protocols, while state regulatory bodies flagged breaches in compliance with technology sector standards governing proprietary assets. These sanctions increased oversight obligations, mandating regular audits and reporting requirements that placed Synergy Tech under intensified scrutiny. The scandal attracted considerable media attention within the industry. Several respected trade publications ran investigative pieces dissecting the sequence of events that led to Synergy Tech's predicament. Articles detailed how short-sighted cost-cutting efforts, exemplified by Gregory's strategy, had compromised critical enterprise systems and violated employee rights. Editorials debated the broader implications for corporate governance and employee treatment, using this case as a cautionary example of the risks companies face when undervaluing institutional knowledge and ignoring contractual protections. Industry forums buzzed with discussions about the importance of thorough documentation and ethical management practices. Gregory's professional reputation suffered irreparable harm. Beyond the termination, he faced disciplinary actions from industry associations, including formal sanctions that limited his capacity to hold senior management roles elsewhere. Insider reports revealed that his network within the software management community was shrinking, as peers distanced themselves following the public fallout. The combination of regulatory penalties and personal censure served as a stark reminder of the accountability leaders bear when cost-saving measures override fiduciary duties. The personal consequences for Gregory unfolded as well. Media coverage hinted at mounting family pressures, with sources confirming that the stress from the scandal and financial setbacks had triggered divorce proceedings. Financial disclosures connected to the legal battles revealed significant personal losses, and public records showed liens and defaults on loans, likely exacerbated by his sudden unemployment and diminished prospects. These developments underscored how professional failures can cascade into private hardship when ethical lapses come to light. Meanwhile, Synergy Tech's broader organizational challenges deepened. Multiple wrongful termination claims surfaced from other employees, similarly affected by abrupt layoffs and contract breaches. These claims extended regulatory investigations and increased legal costs, further straining company resources. Internally, morale plummeted as staff grappled with uncertainty and distrust toward management. Retention rates declined, and recruitment efforts became more difficult as reputation damage made the company less attractive to top talent. Financially, Synergy Tech's stock price suffered a notable decline, an 18% drop over 3 months, reflecting investor concerns about governance, operational risks, and legal liabilities. Quarterly earnings reports highlighted unexpected expense increases tied to regulatory fines, legal settlements, and restructuring costs. Market analysts downgraded the company's outlook, citing the scandal as a key factor undermining growth prospects and client confidence. This financial instability further pressured senior leadership to implement corrective measures and rebuild strategic partnerships. Throughout this period, my position in the unfolding drama remained strategically poised. The documented financial and moral breaches associated with Gregory's actions provided leverage in broader industry negotiations, including indirect influence on settlement discussions and public perceptions. I was mindful to maintain professional decorum, allowing facts and legal processes to shape outcomes rather than personal attacks or public spectacle. In addition, my network within the software management community expanded as colleagues and clients recognized the significance of the case. I engaged professionally with industry groups advocating for ethical employee treatment and robust contract enforcement, contributing insights derived from my experience. These engagements reinforced my standing as a thought leader and underscored the practical importance of strategic documentation and contractual fidelity in navigating corporate challenges. At the operational level, Synergy Tech undertook a series of reforms to address systemic weaknesses exposed by the scandal. New policies mandated comprehensive transition plans for all critical roles, reinforced severance compliance, and enhanced intellectual property safeguards. External consultants were engaged to oversee compliance initiatives and restore client confidence. While these steps were necessary, the process was gradual and underscored the depth of the company's prior governance lapses. Overall, the cascading consequences vividly illustrated how a single managerial misjudgment, when compounded by disregard for contractual and operational realities, could precipitate profound professional and organizational disruption. The financial penalties, reputational damage, leadership turnovers, and regulatory impositions were tangible manifestations of failures that had their origins in a dismissive attitude toward an employee whose expertise was foundational to Synergy Tech's success. As these developments unfolded, the broader professional community took note. The case became a reference point in discussions about safeguarding employee rights, enforcing contract terms, and recognizing the strategic value of institutional knowledge. Industry leaders and HR professionals examined the implications for policy and practice, while legal commentators highlighted the importance of thorough documentation and regulatory compliance. Within this environment, my role as the methodical and strategically minded professional who transformed a moment of dismissal into a case study in accountability gained recognition. The ongoing repercussions at Synergy Tech, coupled with Gregory's personal and professional downfall, underscored the systemic nature of the failure and the necessity of principled responses grounded in evidence and legal rigor. The situation remained dynamic, with Synergy Tech navigating the complex aftermath of regulatory oversight, legal settlements, and internal reforms. Gregory's fate served as a cautionary tale, while the broader industry absorbed lessons about the costs of undervaluing experienced professionals and the power of meticulous documentation. Through it all, my approach of calm professionalism and strategic patience continued to guide my career trajectory, laying groundwork for the next phases of professional advancement and industry impact. The court ruling delivered a decisive affirmation of my claims, awarding me a total of $165,000. This sum encompassed not only the unpaid severance of $118,000 guaranteed by my contract, but also damages for the breach of intellectual property protocols and legal fees accrued throughout the process. The judgment underscored the enforceability of the contractual protections I had relied on, validating the meticulous documentation and strategic patience that had underpinned my case. The legal victory was more than a personal financial restitution. It represented a professional reckoning for Synergy Tech's failure to honor its obligations. The court's findings explicitly highlighted the company's negligent handling of my termination and the operational risks introduced by the absence of proper system transition protocols. By citing detailed evidence, ranging from internal emails to technical system diagrams, the ruling set a precedent, emphasizing the critical importance of upholding contractual severance and safeguarding proprietary assets during personnel changes in the tech sector. Parallel to the court's decision, regulatory authorities imposed fines totaling $200,000 on Synergy Tech. These penalties stemmed from thorough investigations conducted by the Department of Labor and the state's Employment Regulatory Board, which confirmed multiple violations including wrongful termination practices and lapses in intellectual property protection. The regulatory bodies emphasized that Synergy Tech's disregard for mandated severance payments and failure to implement transition protocols constituted serious breaches of labor and corporate governance laws, justifying the substantial fines and ongoing oversight requirements. Gregory Marshall faced the professional consequences with particular severity. His role in orchestrating the cost-cutting measures that led to my dismissal, combined with his explicit directives to circumvent transition policies, drew the attention of industry regulatory associations. These bodies initiated sanctions that effectively blacklisted him from holding senior management positions within comparable firms for a defined period. Internal correspondence revealed the erosion of his professional network as peers distanced themselves, recognizing that his decision-making had not only compromised Synergy Tech's operational integrity, but also violated fundamental ethical standards in leadership. Moreover, media coverage in industry publications amplified the case's impact. Investigative reports dissected the sequence of mismanagement, framing Gregory's actions as emblematic of a wider issue in corporate governance, where short-term financial targets eclipse respect for employee rights and institutional knowledge. Editorial analyses highlighted how the incident served as a cautionary tale for companies tempted to undervalue experienced professionals. These public narratives contributed to a shift in industry discourse, promoting greater awareness of contractual fidelity and strategic documentation as essential safeguards. The professional fallout extended beyond corporate and regulatory realms. Publicly accessible court documents and media coverage revealed the personal toll on Gregory, including reports of mounting family pressures and financial distress. Divorce proceedings, linked in part to the strain created by the scandal, were documented in legal filings, while financial disclosures indicated losses from liens and loan defaults. These developments underscored the intertwined nature of professional accountability and personal consequences, illustrating how managerial failings can cascade into broader life impacts. Within Synergy Tech, the ripple effects were substantial. Following my case, several other employees emerged with wrongful termination claims, alleging similar contractual breaches. and abrupt layoffs. These additional claims compounded the company's legal liabilities and intensified regulatory scrutiny. Internally, employee morale plummeted as trust in leadership diminished, contributing to increased turnover and recruitment challenges. Synergy Tech's reputation suffered in the talent market, making it difficult to attract experienced professionals critical to sustaining complex software operations. Financially, the company endured a notable downturn. Synergy Tech's stock price dropped by approximately 18% over a 3-month period, reflecting investor concerns about governance lapses and escalating legal costs. Quarterly reports detailed unexpected expenses related to regulatory fines, settlements, and restructuring efforts aimed at damage control. Market analysts cited the scandal as a significant factor in downgrading Synergy Tech's growth outlook, emphasizing the tangible business risks associated with mismanaging key personnel and violating contractual obligations. Throughout this turbulent period, my position within the industry strengthened. The documented financial and ethical breaches linked to Gregory's management provided leverage, not only in settlement negotiations, but also in shaping broader perceptions among industry stakeholders. I remained deliberate in maintaining professionalism, allowing documented facts and legal processes to drive outcomes rather than personal animosity or public spectacle. My professional network expanded as colleagues and clients recognized the broader significance of the case. I engaged with industry groups focused on ethical management and employee rights, sharing insights derived from this experience. These participations reinforced my emerging role as an advocate for strategic documentation and contractual adherence, helping to influence best practices across the technology management community. At an organizational level, Synergy Tech implemented reforms aimed at addressing the systemic weaknesses exposed by the case. New policies mandated comprehensive transition planning for all critical roles, reinforced compliance with severance agreements, and enhanced protections for proprietary intellectual property. External consultants were contracted to oversee ongoing audits and restore client confidence. These measures, while necessary, highlighted the depth of governance lapses that had precipitated the crisis. In sum, the multifaceted consequences vividly illustrated how a single managerial misjudgment, fueled by cost-cutting pressures and disregard for established protocols, could trigger cascading disruptions across legal, financial, reputational, and operational dimensions. The penalties, leadership changes, regulatory oversight, and media scrutiny collectively underscored the significance of respecting institutional knowledge and honoring contractual commitments. The case resonated deeply within the professional community. It became a touchstone in discussions about safeguarding employee rights, enforcing contract terms, and acknowledging the indispensable value of experienced personnel. Legal experts and HR leaders referenced the outcome as an exemplar of how meticulous documentation and strategic patience serve as powerful tools in holding corporations accountable. As these developments unfolded, I maintained a measured perspective. My calm professional approach, grounded in evidence and legal rigor, had transformed initial dismissal into a landmark example of systematic justice. The ongoing industry recognition affirmed the lasting importance of competence, contract fidelity, and ethical leadership in technology management. Now settled into my new role at Innovatech, I find myself leading a team of 15 skilled professionals, a notable increase from the 12 I managed at Synergy Tech. This expansion reflects not only the company's confidence in my leadership, but also the broader scope of projects I oversee, each with substantial strategic importance and revenue implications. My compensation package includes a 25% salary increase along with equity participation, which together provide a solid foundation for long-term financial security and align my interests closely with Innovatech's growth trajectory. This arrangement marks a significant professional upgrade and reflects the market's recognition of the value embedded in my expertise, developed and demonstrated over the past decade. The transition to Innovatech was executed with deliberate care to maintain professionalism and avoid burning bridges, notwithstanding the acrimonious circumstances under which I left Synergy Tech. Throughout onboarding, I prioritized thorough knowledge sharing with my new team, applying the same rigorous documentation standards I have always upheld. This ensured rapid integration into Innovatech's operational framework and fostered a collaborative environment where strategic goals are transparent and measurable. I also worked closely with Elliot Barnes, the Director of Operations, to identify potential risks inherited from Synergy Tech's mishandling of project transitions, allowing Innovatech to preemptively address client concerns and system vulnerabilities. Balancing my expanded professional responsibilities with improved work-life integration has been a conscious priority. Unlike my previous role, where workload and stress occasionally encroached on personal time, Innovatech's culture actively supports flexible schedules and remote work options. This has enabled me to establish clearer boundaries and dedicate meaningful time to family and personal health, reinforcing the importance of sustainability in leadership. I have implemented structured weekly planning and delegated operational tasks effectively within my team, focusing my efforts on high-impact strategic initiatives while empowering capable team members to manage day-to-day execution. Reflecting on the journey from the initial dismissal to this point, the lessons rooted in meticulous documentation and an unwavering grasp of contractual rights stand out prominently. Had I allowed frustration or anger to dictate my response, I might have compromised the professional standing I worked years to build. Instead, by systematically collecting evidence, contracts, emails, system diagrams, and engaging expert legal counsel, I transformed a moment of professional dismissal into an opportunity for career advancement and institutional accountability. This approach underscored the power of patience, strategic thinking, and maintaining an unemotional, evidence-based posture amid adversity. The legal victory and regulatory outcomes not only validated my position, but also served as a tangible reminder to the industry about the consequences of disregarding employee rights and institutional knowledge. At Innovatech's annual conference, I was invited to share insights on the case and its implications for leadership and contract management. This recognition reinforced my emerging role as a thought leader, advocating for professional rigor and ethical conduct. Colleagues and peers acknowledged the precedent set, emphasizing that competence and contractual fidelity cannot be casually dismissed without repercussion. Moreover, the equity ownership I now hold aligns my incentives with Innovatech's success, providing not just immediate financial benefits, but a stake in the company's future. This long-term security contrasts starkly with the instability I faced at Synergy Tech, where short-sighted cost-cutting ignored the value of experience and institutional knowledge. The ability to influence strategic direction and mentor a growing team at Innovatech has deepened my professional fulfillment and reinforced the importance of environments that respect and cultivate expertise. The professional community's response has been encouraging. Industry forums and HR groups have referenced the case as a benchmark for best practices in employee treatment and contractual adherence. I continue to participate in panels and write articles, emphasizing the critical role of detailed documentation and legal awareness for career resilience. These engagements not only bolster my professional network, but also contribute to shaping corporate cultures that value transparency and respect for foundational employees. Personally, this experience has redefined my perspective on corporate loyalty and self-advocacy. While I remain committed to collaboration and organizational success, I am keenly aware that professional environments are complex and sometimes adversarial landscapes. Equipping oneself with comprehensive knowledge of contracts, proactive documentation habits, and legal preparedness is indispensable. These tools serve not just as protection, but as instruments for empowerment, enabling measured responses that uphold integrity and maximize outcomes. Looking ahead, I am focused on continuing to lead high-impact projects at Innovatech, fostering team development and contributing to organizational excellence. The strategic patience and systematic justice that shaped my response to betrayal remain guiding principles. By maintaining a calm professional demeanor and emphasizing evidence-based advocacy, I aim to set an example for others navigating similar challenges in the evolving corporate world. Ultimately, this chapter reinforces that professionalism is not merely about expertise, but also about cultivating resilience and strategic foresight. The combination of meticulous preparation, legal acumen, and steady leadership creates a durable foundation from which to navigate setbacks and capitalize on new opportunities. My journey illustrates that calm, methodical action can convert adversity into lasting success, validating the enduring value of competence and contractual fidelity in the modern professional landscape.